So it's actually my 60th birthday today, and I've taken the day off. I had hoped to do a bit of fly fishing on a great still water, but it's pouring with rain and the wind is howling at 40 k's per hour. So the next best thing, of course, is to tie some flies. And I'm a particular fan of Marc Petitjean. I have most of his equipment, a lot of his material, and of course his fantastic CDC book. And although he's obviously presented many of his flies on video, he seems to have neglected the more contemporary flies at the back of the book. And I thought I would do my first fly tying video ever by tying one of these, and it's in fact the MP2302 fly, dry fly, and I've got in the vise a Tiemco 2312 hook, a size 14, which I've debarbed. I don't believe in using barbed hooks. Certainly here in South Africa we have very limited trout waters, and if each fly tyer had to just take one fish out a year, it would almost decimate the stocks. So best to handle them with care and return them safely to the water. I love Marc Petitjean's equipment because they're so well engineered. I mean, many of them, of course, you could say, well, instead of a magic tool, I can just use a bulldog clamp, and of course you can, but his equipment is just so well put together, and it affords one the possibility of tying flies quite rapidly. Which makes a lot of sense if you potentially tie a fly that takes you half an hour and then simply go ahead to lose it on a tree or snag it in the water. So let me get on with it. I'm using his olive unwaxed flat thread, and I'll just apply it onto the hook and cut that off. Always good to keep your thread flat. This is not a particularly dainty fly, but I just find it helps to bind materials on so much easier, and certainly if you are looking for a low profile dainty fly, keeping your thread flat certainly serves to reduce bulk. The fantastic thing about Marc's flies are, of course, they're almost exclusively tied with CDC, Cul de Canard, which certainly makes or allows one to tie a multitude of flies with minimal materials, and also if you're on the move and you want to tie next to the stream, or in the cabin or wherever you are, it just means you can do a lot with very little. So I'm tying these two in just at their tips, and I'll try to bind that onto the shank. Never really that successful in getting it totally neat job, but that'll do. And I tend to make the mistake in this fly of leaving too much room at the head, because in most other flies I almost always run out of space, but I would suggest you take it fairly close. Otherwise you're going to end up with a particularly long, out of proportion head. Right, we can store that to the one side and get Marc's hackle plier pliers, attach those on, and just clip this off so it doesn't get snarled up in the point of the hook. And we simply wrap that around the hook shank with twist each time. And because of the conical nature of the CDC feather, or at least its rachis, as we progress along the hook, the profile gets thicker and thicker, and one achieves a very nice conical shape and even segmentation without really having to do anything at all. CDC, of course, affords great floatability to a fly, and not so much because of the belief that it's the natural oils on the feather, because they do come from around the preen gland of the duck, but simply because the microbarbules of the fibers serve to trap air quite easily and therefore retain sort of buoyancy. So now that we've got that on the shank, and incidentally, I mean, it's really Marc's claim to fame, or at least one of them, to involve CDC for the body of the fly, which is a really great concept. So now we can trim these feathers, at least these fibers, to create the smooth abdomen of the fly. One can be a little bit pedantic about really getting it smooth. I'm sure the fish don't mind, but if it makes the fisherman happy, it inevitably leads to a catch. Right, so there one has this beautiful conical shape, and we can now go ahead and tie in the post to aid in making the fly visible on the water. And I've prepared some fluorescent pink in Marc's magic tool, and I'm just going to cinch those fibers down using his stacker like that. Grab hold of them, and tie them on with a sort of a pinch wrap. And now we can just go to the back to try and elevate these into a more vertical position. Oops, losing a few feathers there, fibers. I've actually used 2 CDC feathers for the post. Marc advocates using only 1, but I felt it aided in visibility. Again, especially with my 60-year-old eyes. So, and then one can just add a little bit of support around the base of the post, just to make it stand a little bit more proud of the hackle that we're going to introduce as the thorax. and as you can see there. Oops. Right. Now the next is again some CDC. This is Marc's favorite bistre color, and what I'm going to do is apply that using a split thread technique, which I find is so much more efficient than creating a dubbing loop, especially for, you know, such a sparse fly. And again, even with my 60-year-old eyes, it's not particularly difficult to split the thread as long as you flatten it in advance, and apply the fibers. And normally I'd spin it up at this point, but what I'm going to do, as per Marc's suggestion in his book, is to use his stacking tool and just advance them a little closer to the fly itself. And then you can spin the bobbin to introduce some winds into the thread. Not too many, but I'm sure you've got enough. And then advance that twist using your fingers, and then winding up the bobbin to trap that in place essentially. And now you can just simply wrap behind the fly and a little bit in front, trying to pull the fibers backwards. And to create a bit of a head. Now I can always use my hands to tie a whip finish, as many tyers like to demonstrate, but I don't want to show off, so and Marc's whip finish tool is just a dream to use, so let's just use that. Get away from these fibers. And that's almost done. So now it just remains to give this a bit of a brush, get the bugginess of the CDC, also to simulate some legs, and then to take the post material largely, give it a twirl and cut it. And then lastly, to just trim the fibers underneath the body to allow it to sit a little bit more flat on the water. And not perfect, because I'm very much a novice, but not too bad either.